I've spent years camping, but there's one trip that still lingers in my mind, making me wonder just how secure we really are in the wilderness. My wife and I had picked a remote site, famous for its towering pines, hoping for a peaceful getaway. The drive-in felt routine, dusty roads, a few deer darting across the headlights, the usual quiet of deep woods. But as soon as we stepped out of the car, the silence felt unnatural. No rustling leaves, no birdsong, just an eerie stillness. We set up our tent beneath a cluster of those tall, weathered trees, the forest floor padded with a thick layer of old needles. The sky remained a dull gray, and the occasional gust of wind sent a chill through us, making us glance over our shoulders as if we weren't alone. I brushed off my unease. After all, we had come for solitude. But as the hours passed, that wind grew stronger. By dusk, it had turned into a howling force, slamming against the trees. The way it whistled through the branches made it sound almost alive. My wife shot me a nervous look, and I forced a casual grin, feeding our small fire for warmth and reassurance. Above us, the clouds churned like they were angry. Then came the snapping, sharp, loud cracks echoing through the forest. Each break in the branches felt like an alarm bell. We found ourselves looking up, waiting for one of the trees to come crashing down. Darkness settled in fast, and with it, any sense of safety disappeared. We crawled into our tent, only to be jolted by a thunderous crack outside. The ground shuddered beneath us as something heavy crashed down. The wind battered the tent so hard I thought it might rip apart. Every gust made me brace for impact, expecting a branch to come spearing through the fabric. Then, amid the storm's fury, I swore I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the chaos. My wife whispered my name, her voice trembling. I pretended I hadn't heard anything. There was no way I was stepping outside. Every snap, every crash beyond our thin walls felt like the world was coming undone. When dawn finally crept in, our campsite looked like a battlefield. Enormous branches lay scattered. Our fire pit was buried under debris, and somehow, our tent had barely survived. As we packed up, I noticed fresh prints in the mud. Prints that didn't match our boots. Not wanting to alarm my wife, I dismissed them as a trick of the light. But the unease stuck with me as we drove away. We had come for a quiet weekend, but the forest had its own plans. And part of me couldn't help but wonder, if we had stayed just a little longer, would we have found out who or what had been out there? After that nightmarish storm, I figured a camping trip with a buddy might be more relaxed. We'd heard of an old site, only reachable with a solid four-wheel drive. The place was rumored to have some broken-down picnic tables, a rusting fire ring, and 2 abandoned shacks that hadn't been checked in years. That alone should have been a warning, but we wanted an adventure. We arrived around midday, kicking up dust as we veered off the main road onto a rough, overgrown trail. The place was empty, no tracks, no sign of recent visitors. After unloading, we joked about who'd end up with tetanus first and started setting up. My friend wandered to the first shack but returned looking unsettled. He didn't say much, just went to check the second one instead. When he finally spoke, he just said, "You need to see what's in that first one." Expecting something gross, maybe a raccoon nest, I braced myself. But inside, there were 3 massive backpacks, all coated in a fine layer of dust. 2 looked normal enough, packed with standard camping gear, flashlights, sleeping bags, gas canisters. The third was just bizarre. Every pocket, every compartment was stuffed with candy, specifically Skittles. Big bags, small pouches, hundreds of them, filling every inch of the bag. The 4 days we spent there only made it weirder. No one came to claim the bags. No hikers, no campers, no one. At night, it was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses in on you. A few times, I thought I heard twigs snapping near our tents, but whenever I checked, nothing was there. My friend swore he heard whispers. We both chalked it up to nerves, but the weight of that silence was suffocating. When we finally packed up to leave, we left the backpacks exactly as we found them. Something about taking them felt wrong. Maybe we were paranoid, but it was as if the woods didn't want them disturbed. We told the authorities, but I doubt they rushed out there. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that those bags were part of something we weren't supposed to find. Hoping to shake off the unease from my last 2 trips, I set out alone with my dog, thinking a quiet solo camp might clear my head. No storms, no abandoned supplies. Just me, my dog, and a stretch of forest near a back road. The drive was peaceful, the sun just beginning to dip below the trees when I found a decent spot. I kept it simple, just a tarp, a small fire, my dog curled at my feet. The rustling breeze and distant sound of a creek gave the place a soothing vibe, but I still couldn't fully relax. My mind kept drifting back to those wrecked pines near our tent, to those strange backpacks. Just as sleep began tugging at me, I caught the glow of headlights weaving through the trees. Then an engine roared way louder than necessary. A group of drunken voices echoed through the stillness. My heart pounded as my dog snapped to attention, ears perked. Then came the gunshots, loud, reckless, the kind fired off just for fun or for something worse. I hunched down, heart racing. Were they just messing around? Or did they know I was here? The land sloped just enough that stray bullets could easily ricochet into my camp. My dog whined. I knew we couldn't stay. I quickly smothered the fire, grabbed my essentials, and gripped the leash tight. The last thing I wanted was for my tiny flame to advertise our presence. The forest floor crackled beneath each step, making silence impossible. For a fleeting second, I worried about stumbling across footprints like the ones after the storm. But another gunshot sliced through the thought, reminding me to keep moving. My pulse thundered as we wove through the trees, ducking low every time another shot rang out. My brain churned with questions. Was this just bad luck? Or was something tying all these incidents together? Eventually, I found a rough trail leading away from the noise. The shots faded, replaced by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I don't know how far I walked in that adrenaline-fueled haze, but when I finally stumbled onto a real road, I felt drained. My dog pressed against my leg, sharing my relief. I paused, catching my breath, but the night had that same eerie stillness, just like before the storm. And for a second, I was sure I saw movement at the edge of my flashlight beam. A figure, or just shadows playing tricks. I froze, waiting, but there was nothing. If someone was there, they stayed hidden. Part of me wanted to call it quits, find a motel for the night, but something kept pulling me back, like I had to figure out why these things kept happening. Was it all in my head? Was I just unlucky? Or was there something lurking in these woods? Something tying it all together? I climbed into my car, gripping the wheel tight. The only sound was the wind through the branches and my own heartbeat in my ears. I told myself it was just some reckless campers, nothing more, but deep down I knew better. I still remember how the flames flickered that night, throwing restless shadows across our campsite. My parents sat chatting with some fellow campers, exchanging tips on fishing spots and how to steer clear of raccoons. Meanwhile, I was getting antsy. My friend and I locked eyes across the fire, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. It was time for one of our late-night strolls. Back then, I thought I knew these woods inside and out. I'd spent almost every summer camping and had convinced myself I understood every trail, every sound, and every place safe to wander without losing my way. But something about that night felt different. A faint unease tugged at me, though I brushed it off. Maybe it was the way the clouds swallowed the moon or how the trees beyond our tents seemed darker than usual, as if pressing in closer. Whatever it was, my confidence wavered for just a second, but pride wouldn't let me back down. I gestured to my friend, and we slipped away. There's a certain rush in stepping past the warm glow of a campfire into the near-total blackness beyond. Twigs cracked under our feet, and the thick, damp scent of earth hung in the air like a warning we chose to ignore. Normally, we stayed close enough to glimpse the embers through the trees, but that night we pushed further, testing our limits. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. You'd expect the night to be alive with chirping crickets and rustling critters, but instead, an eerie stillness settled around us. It was too quiet. Every little noise, the rustle of a branch, the crunch of leaves, felt amplified, making my nerves tighten. My friend and I exchanged uneasy grins, but the tension was real. We kept scanning the darkness, half expecting something to step out from between the trunks. At some point, I realized we'd gone farther than usual. I turned, hoping to catch a comforting flicker of our fire through the trees, but saw nothing but shifting shadows. Then I heard it, a voice, faint, like someone whispering just behind me. My body stiffened. My friend clicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as we whipped around, searching. But all we saw were twisted branches and fallen logs. No figures, no faces. I told myself it was just the wind, but there was no wind that night. The air was thick and completely still. We stood frozen in the silence, our own ragged breaths embarrassingly loud. Then, stubborn as ever, we switched off the light. This was our tradition, after all. We wouldn't let a few nerves shake us. Still, we walked faster, my laugh coming out forced as I tried to brush off the tension. My friend didn't laugh at all. He just kept glancing behind us, as if he expected something to emerge from the darkness at any moment. Then another whisper came, closer. This time, the sound almost formed words, though they were garbled and strange, like someone struggling to remember how to speak. My pulse hammered. We stopped. Run or stay? Fear clashed with curiosity. If we'd misjudged our direction, we could be lost. And that thought, being unsure if we were close to camp or miles away, sent real panic through me. I nudged my friend, and without a word, we turned back. We wanted to believe we were retracing our steps, but everything looked unfamiliar now. Every tree seemed foreign, every shadow a lurking threat. The air around us felt charged, making my skin prickle. And then the realization hit. We weren't hearing insects or rustling leaves. Something out here was making those sounds, something with a voice. And it didn't sound like another camper whispering a joke to a friend. Sounded wrong. Our pace quickened. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Each footstep seemed deafening in the stillness. My friend met my eyes, and in that instant we silently agreed, no running, not yet. But deep down, we both wanted to. The branches snagged at our clothes, and the hush around us felt almost watchful, as if the forest itself was waiting. Then another whisper, just behind us. I felt it almost on the back of my neck. We stopped dead. One more glance at each other was enough. We needed to get out of here. Flashlights flicked on again, beams sweeping over tangled undergrowth. My throat was dry. I just wanted to see something familiar, anything to prove we were on the right path. But all the light revealed were more trees, more darkness. The dread sank in deeper. It wasn't just about being lost anymore. It was the sickening sense that something was following us, just out of sight. I grabbed my friend's arm and pulled him forward. We had to move. We had to get back to camp, where the firelight might make this feel like a bad joke. But deep inside, I knew the forest wasn't going to let us forget this night so easily. The closer we got, the heavier the air felt, like the woods were closing in. Then, just as my nerves reached their breaking point, my flashlight caught something in its beam. A shape, hunched, moving in the undergrowth. My breath hitched. My friend's grip on my arm tightened. We didn't speak. We just watched as the figure crawled forward, dragging itself over dead leaves. Torn clothing clung to it, tattered and stained. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was human or something else. The posture was wrong. Then a sound, half speech, half gibberish, escaped its lips. My friend's light rose, illuminating a face. A woman's face, pale, gaunt, her eyes wide with something between fear and confusion. Her cheek was smeared with dirt, and her hair stuck out in tangled clumps. She swayed unsteadily and muttered about needing to find her way back to her campsite. Every instinct told me to step away, but she looked lost, and no matter how unsettling the situation felt, we couldn't just leave her there. My friend and I exchanged a look before offering to help. She mumbled what might have been agreement, then staggered forward. I caught her before she collapsed, and that close, I noticed a strange chemical smell on her breath. Alcohol? Something else? We walked slowly, supporting her on either side. She kept whispering, fragments of names, numbers, broken phrases. Occasionally, she stopped to glance over her shoulder, as if she expected something else to emerge from the woods. I found myself doing the same. Then, finally, a break in the trees, a dull orange flicker ahead. The campfire. Relief flooded me, but unease still clung tight. As we stepped into the clearing, a small group of people near the fire turned. One of them jumped up, recognizing her. Apparently, she'd wandered off after a few late-night drinks, and no one had noticed how long she'd been missing. My friend and I watched as they helped her sit, barely acknowledging what had just happened. No questions about the eerie hike back, no concern for the things we'd heard out there. Just casual relief, as if nothing strange had happened at all. We left them there, still shaken. Everything about our own campsite, the laughter, the warm glow, felt more precious now. But I couldn't shake the memory of that moment when we first saw her in the flashlight's beam. If we'd taken a different path, or left a minute earlier, we might never have found her. As we settled back in, my family asked if we'd enjoyed our walk. We gave vague answers. We weren't ready to talk about it yet. Later, lying in my sleeping bag, I couldn't stop replaying the woman's face, the haunted way she had stared into the trees. And in the back of my mind, I swore I could still hear whispers drifting through the forest, waiting for the next unwary campers to stray too far into the dark. I remember settling into our small hiking tent that evening with a mix of exhaustion and quiet anticipation. Just me and my fiancé tucked away in a secluded spot deep in the woods. We had spent the entire day trekking through winding trails, taking in the distant sounds of rustling leaves and chirping insects. By the time we pitched our tent, I was drained in that satisfying way that usually guarantees a deep sleep. Sometime after midnight, I stirred awake. At first, all I noticed was the heavy darkness, interrupted only by faint moonlight filtering through the thin fabric of our tent. I blinked, trying to shake off sleep, and soon realized I needed to step outside for a quick bathroom break. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just one of those inconvenient moments when nature calls at the worst time. I considered ignoring it, but I knew I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep unless I took care of it. I turned slightly, checking on my fiancé, careful not to wake him. He was still sound asleep, his breathing slow and steady. Just as I made up my mind to slip outside quietly, a sound cut through the stillness. A slow, deliberate scratching, like fingers dragging across the ground. My pulse quickened. Maybe it was just some small animal scurrying nearby, but something about the sound felt too precise, too intentional. I held my breath, waiting to hear it fade, but it continued. Gathering my courage, I inched the tent zipper open just enough to peek out. A sliver of moonlight illuminated the forest floor. At first, all I could see were the familiar shapes of shrubs and tall tree trunks. Then, just a few feet away, I noticed movement. A figure crouched low, barely visible in the dim light. My eyes adjusted, and I saw that it was a woman. She seemed young, her hair tangled and matted, hanging around her face in clumps. She was so close to our tent that I couldn't understand how I hadn't heard her approach. She was digging into the dirt with her bare hands, scooping up little piles like she was searching for something buried. There was something unsettling about her movements, slow, careful, almost trance-like. I tried to steady my breath, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid she might hear it. My gaze flickered to my fiancé, still oblivious, fast asleep. For a moment, I considered zipping the tent closed and pretending I hadn't seen her. But what if she needed help? Or worse, what if she had bad intentions? The uncertainty sent a shiver down my spine. I scooted backward and nudged my fiancé awake, whispering that someone was right outside. His eyes snapped open, and he turned toward the half-open zipper. Without hesitation, he reached for our flashlight. I stayed low, watching over his shoulder as he aimed the beam toward the figure. She barely reacted, just paused her digging. The light revealed her face, smeared with dirt and sweat, her eyes distant and unfocused. My fiancé called out, "Hey, are you okay?" But she didn't respond. She just slowly stood, letting the loose dirt slip from her fingers. For a brief moment, I thought she might say something, or worse, rush at us. But instead, she turned in a smooth, eerie motion and walked away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving behind the shallow hole she had been digging. We exchanged uneasy glances. Part of me wanted to go after her to figure out who she was, but common sense warned against it. Suddenly, the isolation of our campsite felt overwhelming. After a hushed discussion, I decided I still needed to step outside. I unzipped the tent the rest of the way, scanning the darkness for any sign of her. The air had turned colder, seeping through my jacket, and the trees cast long, menacing shadows. My fiancé stood nearby, flashlight in hand, scanning our surroundings while I hurriedly took care of my business. When we settled back inside, we whispered about what we had seen. Was she a lost camper? Someone who had wandered away from another site? Neither explanation sat right. Eventually, exhaustion won over unease, and we lay back down, tent zipped shut. But every time the wind rustled the leaves, I tensed, half expecting to see her crouched just outside again. The thin walls of the tent felt flimsy, barely a barrier at all. At some point, I must have dozed off, but I woke abruptly to the sound of metal clinking just outside. It wasn't part of a dream, this was real. The noise of someone sifting through our gear sent a jolt of fear through me. I turned to see my fiancé's eyes widen in realization. We locked gazes, silent, listening as the rummaging continued. Then, slowly, he unzipped the tent and stepped out, flashlight raised. I followed, my heart racing. She was there again, the same woman, the same ragged clothes and disheveled hair. This time, she was crouched among our belongings, pots and utensils scattered around her. She wasn't taking anything, just examining everything with an unsettling curiosity. My fiancé's voice was firm but wary as he called out, "That's our stuff. Do you need help?" The flashlight beam landed on her face. She lifted her head slightly, letting a metal cup slip from her grasp, but she didn't answer. She just stared at us, expression unreadable. I tried to decipher something in her face. Fear, confusion, anger, but there was nothing. Was she lost? Dangerous? My stomach twisted. My fiancé kept speaking, asking if she needed assistance, but she remained silent. He took a cautious step back toward the tent, realizing we couldn't force her to leave without risking a confrontation. I stood frozen, watching her. In the dim light, a smudge of dirt across her cheek made her look almost feral. Then, as if she had lost interest, she lowered herself back into a crouch and resumed rummaging through our things. A wave of instinct screamed at me. This wasn't normal. This wasn't someone who would respond to reason. Quietly, we retreated back into the tent, zipping it shut. We sat there, breath held, listening as she continued shuffling through our gear. Then, after a long, tense moment, the sounds stopped. Just when I thought she had finally left, the scratching returned. Right beside the tent, mere inches from where I sat. My nerves snapped. I shouted for her to stop. The reaction was immediate. A sudden, frantic scrambling, like a startled animal fleeing through the brush. I fumbled with the zipper, desperate to see, but by the time I peered outside, she was gone. Only darkness remained. We barely slept after that. Every small noise made us jump. My fiancé kept the flashlight in his grip, sweeping the beam over the thin tent walls every few minutes. The forest felt heavier, almost pressing in on us. When dawn finally arrived, we cautiously unzipped the tent. Our campsite was a mess, gear scattered everywhere. But the most disturbing thing was the hole beside our tent, now nearly a foot deep. No explanation, no apparent purpose, just a hole. There were no signs of her. No other tents, no footprints beyond the disturbed earth near ours. Just our stuff left in disarray. We packed quickly, still expecting her to appear from the trees. But she never did. The entire hike back, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half convinced she was following. The shadows seemed to shift, but I never saw her again. Looking back, it remains the most unsettling experience I've had in the wild. Because when it's another person acting in a way that defies understanding, the unknown is far more terrifying than any storm or wild animal. Out there, your sense of security can disappear in an instant. All it takes is one stranger with an unsettling purpose. I should have sensed something was wrong the moment we veered onto that narrow dirt road. The main campground had been packed, lanterns glowing, people laughing around towering bonfires. I hoped we'd find a quieter area just a bit farther out. Quiet is exactly what we found, but I don't think it was the kind of peace we had in mind. By the time we climbed out of the car, the last traces of sunlight had long vanished. My phone's flashlight barely lit up the tiny gravel clearing where we stopped. My girlfriend shot me a look that clearly meant, "This is as good as it gets." Our friend, riding a mix of excitement and unease, scanned the tree line, probably wondering if we'd made a mistake picking the outskirts of the site. I shrugged, acting like it was no big deal, but deep down, something felt off. That gut feeling, the kind that tells you you're about to walk into something strange, was already creeping in. Still, we got to work. The three of us struggled with our tents, beams of light darting through the darkness as we moved. At one point, I jammed my thumb against a tent stake, muttering a few choice words under my breath. Every time a twig snapped in the woods, we'd freeze, staring into the darkness. The silence pressed in on us, thick and unnatural, like the whole forest had decided to hold its breath. It sent a chill down my spine every time the wind rustled the leaves. Once both tents were finally up, we built a small fire. Not much, just enough to roast a few hot dogs and keep morale up. The flickering glow lit up our faces, and I swear the shadows around us stretched taller. My girlfriend forced a grin, trying to mask her unease, while our friend told a half-hearted story about some local ghost legend she'd heard. It was the usual stuff. Mysterious figures, unlucky hikers, but out here in the darkness, everything felt more intense. As we talked, our words seemed to vanish into the night, swallowed up before they could echo. I tried to ignore the nagging thought that maybe there was a reason this part of the campground was empty. We huddled close to the fire, glancing over our shoulders whenever a breeze stirred the brush. Despite our attempts to laugh it off, I think we were all eager to crawl into our tents and let the night pass without trouble. Eventually, the flames dwindled to glowing embers. We poured water over the pit, dousing the last flickers, then hurried into our tents. My girlfriend and I in one, our friend in the other. Before zipping up, I scanned our surroundings with my flashlight one last time. Trees, gravel, a faint silhouette of the lake beyond. Just normal stuff, and yet, my stomach was twisted in knots for reasons I couldn't explain. I settled into my sleeping bag, forcing myself to shake off the uneasy feeling. This was just another camping trip. I reminded myself, a routine night outdoors. Let the woods do their thing, and everything would be fine by morning. I closed my eyes, hoping to drift off. I had no idea the real terror hadn't even begun. Sometime around midnight, something jolted me awake. My thoughts were foggy, my muscles stiff from lying on the rocky ground. At first, I thought it was just my own breathing, but then I heard it, a distant cry cutting through the stillness. It was long and wavering, unlike anything I'd ever heard in the wild. The way it rose and fell sent a sharp jolt of fear through my chest. My girlfriend stirred beside me, gripping my arm. "That's not a coyote," she whispered. She was right. It wasn't an owl either. I'd heard those enough times to tell the difference. The sound had a strange, eerie tone, like a warning, or maybe a summons. It echoed through the thick trees surrounding us. I whispered something reassuring, probably just an animal passing through. The lie tasted bitter, but half comfort was better than nothing. We stayed still, listening for another sound. But the howl stopped, and the quiet that followed felt almost deliberate, like the whole forest was waiting to see how we'd react. Minutes passed, and eventually the tension faded a little. My girlfriend laid back down. I tried to follow her lead, focusing on the rustling of sleeping bags and the steady breathing of our friend in the other tent. But that cry kept replaying in my mind. Just as I was finally dozing off again, I heard it, a faint scraping sound outside. At first, I thought it was a branch dragging against the gravel, but the rhythm was too deliberate. Footsteps, careful, measured steps crunching over the rocks. My heart pounded. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe our friend had gotten up to use the bathroom? But when I called her name, there was no answer. I didn't check. I didn't dare. I just laid there, telling myself it was nothing. But a tiny part of me knew better. Somehow, exhaustion won out, and I drifted into uneasy sleep. Hours later, I woke again. A soft glow filtered through the tent walls. Relief flooded me. I thought dawn had finally come. But when I checked my phone, the time read 3 a.m. That made no sense. The light felt real, but when I peeked through the tent zipper, the woods outside were still cloaked in darkness. My girlfriend stirred beside me, mumbling about nightmares. She dreamt of shifting shapes in the trees. A strange feeling settled over me. Time felt wrong, like we were caught in some endless loop, teetering between night and morning. I muttered something about how we'd laugh about this in the daylight, but deep down I wasn't sure. Then the worst part happened. I woke up again, this time in raw terror. Something was pressing against the bottom of my sleeping bag, pinning my feet. The tent fabric stretched inward, pushed by something from outside. For half a second, I was frozen, unable to breathe. Then instinct took over. I thrashed, yelling so loud my voice cracked. My girlfriend shot up, gripping my arm, eyes wide with panic. But suddenly the pressure was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just our ragged breathing. We sat there paralyzed. Had our friend heard? Had she seen anything? We weren't about to wait around to find out. The second the first hint of dawn actually arrived, we tore our campsite apart, shoving our gear into our bags with trembling hands. Every rustle in the brush had me whipping my head around, expecting to see something watching from the trees. By 4:40 a.m., we were in the car, headlights slicing through the woods as we sped away. Only once we reached the main road, streetlights flickering ahead, did I start breathing normally again. But I couldn't shake the feeling of that pressure on my feet. The cry in the night, the unseen steps in the dark. We left that campsite behind, but whatever lurked in those woods wasn't done whispering. And the memory of that night followed us home. By the time I arrived at that valley in the late afternoon, I was determined to escape all the stress and endless notifications. The stillness out there was almost intoxicating. No cell service, no packed campsites, just the occasional call of a bird echoing through the hills. My plan was simple: set up camp before nightfall and enjoy some much-needed peace. But of course, I had misjudged my timing. The sun was sinking lower than I had expected, its golden light barely guiding my way. That's when I noticed someone on the trail ahead. He introduced himself as if it were completely ordinary to stumble upon a stranger in the middle of nowhere. I can't explain why, but his easygoing manner put me at ease. He asked if I was searching for a camping spot, then pointed me toward a secluded place near the river. The way he described it, close to the road but hidden from sight, piqued my curiosity. A part of me wondered why it needed to be so out of view, but I decided not to question it. Maybe I was just too grateful for the tip to be suspicious. We wove through dense brush that seemed to close in behind us. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the main trail, but it had vanished into a maze of shadows. The local led me to a perfect little spot, a fire pit lined with worn stones, a clearing just big enough for my truck, and the river's steady murmur nearby. He nodded, mentioned I'd probably have the place to myself, and then left just as quickly as he had appeared. At first, it felt like I had stumbled upon a hidden paradise. The sky was streaked with pink and violet as I got to work building a fire before full darkness set in. Sparks crackled as I fed the flames, the heat warming my face in the cool air. I settled into my chair, popped open a drink, and reflexively checked my phone, only to laugh when I remembered I had no signal. As night crept in, I played a comedy podcast, letting the jokes fill the silence. I knew it probably wasn't the smartest move to broadcast my presence in the wilderness, but the laughter made the quiet less eerie. Feeling totally alone, I let the volume rise. I might have been too comfortable in my solitude. By the time I noticed how late it was, the fire had cast long, flickering shadows across the campsite. For a second, I considered setting up my tent, but exhaustion won out. The thought of struggling with tent poles under a weak flashlight was unappealing, and the back of my truck, with its camper shell, promised a quicker, easier shelter. I climbed in, arranged a makeshift bed, and planned to wake up refreshed, ready for a slow morning by the river. Despite my efforts to relax, I couldn't shake a strange awareness as I drifted off. Every small twig snap outside had me wondering if a raccoon or something else was creeping around. I told myself it was just the thrill of being alone. Still, I found myself peering out the windows, watching dark shapes shift beyond the truck. Sleep finally took hold, but it was restless. Occasionally, the wind gusted, making the underbrush shudder in the fire's dying glow. Somewhere in my half-conscious mind, I wondered if something had been listening to my podcast. At one point, I sat up and looked outside, but all I saw were the silhouettes of trees swaying. I told myself I was being paranoid and forced myself to relax. By the time I truly fell asleep, the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, and the world beyond my truck was pitch black. Morning arrived with a crisp chill that had me blinking awake. My back ached from the hard surface, but at least I'd stayed warm. I fumbled around for some kindling and got the fire going again, letting the flames build while I prepared a quick breakfast. The plan was simple: enjoy the quiet morning, maybe crack a drink, and soak in the peace before heading back to civilization. I had just settled into my chair when I noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. At first, I assumed it was some local wildlife sniffing around for scraps. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was a person. A tall, disheveled figure wrapped in layers of worn-out clothing. Plastic grocery bags, dozens of them, were tied around his arms and torso like strange streamers. Every story I'd ever heard about wanderers in remote places flashed through my mind. He didn't say a word, didn't even look directly at me. He shuffled forward, paused, then stepped to the side, like he couldn't decide whether to approach or disappear. The whole situation felt wrong. I raised a hand in greeting. "Morning," I called out, trying to sound casual. No response, just more of that odd pacing. I figured maybe he was hungry, so I offered him some breakfast. He took a few more steps around the perimeter of my sight, the plastic bags rustling with each movement. That sound unsettled me more than anything he could have said. My instincts screamed at me. I kept my bear spray and knife within reach, hoping I wouldn't need them. Maybe he was just lost or confused. So I tried again, this time offering a drink. Still, he didn't respond. He never looked at me, not once. The way he kept his head turned away made my skin crawl, like he was waiting for me to get distracted so he could move in. The seconds dragged. I racked my brain for something else to say, some way to defuse whatever this was. But all I could think was, this won't end in a friendly handshake. Frustration and fear built up in me. "Acknowledge me or get out," I snapped, my voice uneven. He didn't react, just stood there, staring at the ground. My grip on the bear spray tightened. I took one step forward, just one, and lifted the canister, making sure he saw it. That finally got a reaction. He slumped, turned away, and shuffled off, disappearing the same way he had arrived, as if our unsettling standoff had never happened. I stood frozen for a long moment, then snapped into action. Forget breakfast. Forget enjoying the morning. I doused the fire, threw my gear into the truck, and fumbled with my keys, my brain conjuring images of him lurking just beyond the trees, waiting for me to drop my guard. The gravel crunched under my tires as I tore out of that hidden campsite. Relief hit me in waves, but I didn't truly feel safe until I was miles away from that valley. Even then, my mind buzzed with questions. Had he been there all night, listening as I laughed at my podcast and sipped my drink by the fire, completely unaware of his presence? The thought made my skin crawl. I almost thanked my own laziness for not setting up my tent. Those thin truck walls had been the only thing between me and whatever his intentions might have been. Even now, I don't know what he wanted. All I know is, I'm certain it was best that I didn't stick around to find out. The morning started at my buddy's house. The storm from the previous night had finally passed, but the air still felt strange, like there was something buzzing just under the surface. It wasn't just the leftover humidity, it was more like a heavy pressure hanging in the atmosphere. We were supposed to be excited about heading into the woods, but everyone was dragging their feet around the living room. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself I was just picking up on someone else's nerves. Eventually, we shuffled outside to pack up the ATVs. 2 of them, each pulling a small trailer loaded with our tents, water jugs, and random supplies. We'd done trips like this plenty of times before, but something about the quiet among us felt off. Usually, we'd be laughing and joking loudly, but today we just fumbled with straps and double-checked our gear in silence. Then, without a word, we set off. The first few minutes on the muddy trail felt like stepping into another world. The forest around us wasn't alive with the usual summer sounds. No birds chirping overhead, no rustling in the bushes. Just the growl of our engines and the wet squelch of tires in the mud. I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were watching us, but I kept my mouth shut. No one else was talking, and I didn't want to be the one to blurt out something dumb. A couple of miles in, we stopped for a breather near a bent old stump. The air was thick, and I leaned against one of the trailers, catching my breath. That's when something darted across the path ahead, maybe 50 feet away. I told myself it was a deer, even though it moved too quickly, too upright. My friend's face went pale, but he brushed it off just as fast. I think we all felt it, that shared, uneasy moment where we'd seen something that didn't quite belong. Still, we got back on and pushed forward. Fallen branches and deep, slick ruts in the ground slowed us down. We had to take detours over and over, and somehow the sunlight seemed to fade faster than it should have. The woods around us looked darker, like the day itself was slipping away too soon. Every time we stopped to figure out a new path, the silence pressed in so thick it felt like a weight on my chest. I thought I heard faint snaps in the underbrush, but when I turned, I saw nothing, just damp leaves and gnarled trees. By the time we reached our campsite, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and my pulse was hammering harder than it should have been. The whole trip there had felt wrong, though I couldn't explain why, and I had no idea how much weirder things were about to get. As we unloaded our gear into the clearing, the daylight was already fading. It felt like stepping into a room where something unseen was lurking just out of sight. We spread out, trying to find decent ground for our tents, exchanging uneasy glances whenever a twig snapped or a gust of wind rustled the leaves. The air clung to our skin, heavy and oppressive, and the stillness, no birds, no animals, was unnatural, like the whole forest was holding its breath. We were exhausted, but no one suggested turning back. Instead, we rushed to set up camp. My hands were unsteady as I hammered tent stakes into the damp earth, while my friends scattered to gather firewood. The plan was simple: get a fire going and chase away the strange tension that had been hanging over us all day. At first, I thought the tall shape in the trees was just another oddly twisted trunk, blending into the dimming light. But then it moved. I could see it through the space between the tents, tall, unnaturally still. My friend noticed too because his voice cracked mid-laugh when he spotted it. We froze, waiting for it to do something, anything. Then, before I could process it, it bolted, vanishing deeper into the woods with an unnatural speed that sent a cold wave down my spine. We gathered around the fire pit, our eyes darting between the shifting shadows. When the first sparks caught, the relief was almost overwhelming. But as the firelight flickered, it played tricks on my eyes. Shapes seemed to jump and twist at the edges of the glow. Every little sound outside that ring of light made my stomach tighten. My legs tensed to run at the first sign of something coming too close. Night settled faster than it should have. I had a sinking realization that we had no way out, not until morning. The trails were too muddy, too dense to navigate in total darkness. We huddled around the fire, too shaken to tell the usual ghost stories. Instead, we scanned the dark, convinced that thing was still out there, just beyond our sight. At one point, I swore I heard a faint crunch nearby. I spun around, but there was nothing, just trees stretching into the night. We agreed to keep watch in shifts, but sleep was out of the question. When I finally retreated to my tent, I lay there, heart pounding in my ears, watching the faint lantern light cast uneasy shadows on the canvas. Every now and then, someone by the fire would call out, checking in. The worst part was the silence between those calls. Each pause made me imagine that figure creeping closer, step by step. Somehow, the hours crawled by without anything worse happening. When the first light of dawn finally broke through the trees, we tore down camp like our lives depended on it. Maybe they did. Sleep or no sleep, we just wanted to be out of there. As soon as the last piece of gear was loaded up, a wave of relief washed over us. The morning sky was gray and dreary, but to me, it felt like the brightest sunshine I'd ever seen. None of us talked much as we headed back. My head stayed on a swivel, scanning the forest in my peripheral vision. Every now and then, I thought I saw a lanky silhouette lurking in the shadows, and my heartbeat would spike. But nothing stepped onto the path. It was as if the forest had decided to keep its secrets now that we were leaving. When we finally pulled into my friend's driveway, I could almost taste the relief. We unloaded in silence, none of us quite ready to put into words what we had seen. Even later, when the initial shock faded, we danced around the details, throwing out half-hearted explanations. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever we had stumbled into out there, it hadn't been a normal camping trip. Sometimes the wild doesn't give you answers. It just lets you go and hopes you never come back.